Hi, this is Natalie from Tangle Artistry, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Merry Christmas wooden round sign. So the first thing we're going to do is take this tape off of our sign. You're actually going to use this tape for your project, so just peel it off carefully and then set it aside so that you can use it on your project. Once you've removed the tape, we can set our little pieces aside carefully, and we're going to paint our background. To paint your background, you're going to take one of the included sponges. You're going to dip it into water and then wring it out really well. And then take a towel or something and just kind of dab it off so the sponge is damp, but it's not wet. And then your paints come in these little containers like this. You're just going to take it and shake it up really good, open it up, and then you can paint right out of the tub. You're going to dip your sponge into the brown paint, dab it off onto your paper plate, and then we're just going to wipe across. And we're just going to keep doing that to cover the whole background. So dip in, dab off, and then wipe across to paint your background. At this point, you can also paint your edges if you would like. When you're painting your edges, if you got any on the front, just go ahead and wipe that off. And then I just brush across to make sure if I got any like little crumbly bits or anything while I was painting to get those off. The sponges are reusable, so when you're done, just take them to the sink and wash them, or if you have a bowl of water nearby, you can use that to rinse them out. Let that dry for a couple minutes. Once it's dry, we're going to apply the painter's tape. So take that painter's tape that was included in the kit. Make sure it is painter's tape. If you use masking tape or some other kind of tape, it might take your paint off. And we're going to put this piece of tape about 1.5 inches up from the bottom. And then press it down. And then we're going to put another piece of painter's tape about 4.5 inches, 5 inches away from that. So I always like to line it up and then just kind of move both of my arms up, and that way it'll stay straight. And then before I stick it down, I just want to make sure that my Christmas is going to fit. So I might want to move it up just a little bit. You want it to be bigger than your Christmas, but smaller than your stencil. Once I have it where I want it, I'm just going to stick it down. So I'm just going to go over with my fingers and press that down. Make sure there's not any lumps or bumps or any spots where the paint will seep underneath. And then we're going to paint this part red. So I'm just going to take the sponge, dip it into the red paint, and then dab it off onto my paper plate. And then the same thing, I'm just going to wipe across here, being careful not to take up my tape. Let that dry until it's not shiny anymore, and then I'm going to do a second coat. Once you've done 2 layers, you're going to let that dry really well. So I'm going to set this aside for right now, and I'm going to paint my little pieces. If you take the other pieces of tape that you have and fold them together so that the sticky part is facing out, and then put it down on your table, you can stick these into the tape so that they will stay in place while you paint them. And I'm going to do the same thing with my sponge, except this time instead of swiping across, I'm going to pounce. So I'm going to dip my sponge into paint, dab it off onto the paper plate so I don't have a lot of paint on my sponge. And then I'm just going to very lightly pounce up and down so that I cover the pieces. And I'm going to do the Christmas and Merry white, and then I'm going to do my tree green in the same method. You might need 2 coats. When I sponge, I'm just kind of lightly dabbing so that I don't get paint onto my edges. Once I've done my letters and my tree, I'm going to take that same sponge that had the white paint on it and make sure I don't have too much. So I've gone ahead and dipped it in the white and dabbed it off. And I'm just going to very, very lightly just kind of add some white to the edges of my tree to kind of make it look like snow. So you can do as much or as little as you want. And then I'm just going to take those and set everything aside to dry. And I'm going to paint my stand using the same method with the sponge. I'm going to paint my stand black, so I'm going to dip my sponge in the black paint, dab it off, and then I'm just going to either dab or swipe across to paint these. Make sure to let them dry. I would probably do 2 coats and do the back side as well. Once you're done with that, just set everything aside. Make sure that your red paint is extremely dry. You don't want it to be tacky or slightly wet at all, because we're gonna put the stencil on top of it, and if it has any moisture in it still, when you put the stencil on and take it off, it can take your paint off. So make sure that's really dry. Attach our stencil, the first thing we're going to do is take a credit card or a plastic reward card, something that's not too stiff, a little flexible, and we're just going to go over, make sure that the stencil is flat and the tape is secure. Take a pen and I'm going to trace this square or this rectangle right here on the inside. So once I take it off the backer, I'll be able to see it to line it up on my board. And then we're going to peel the stencil off of this white backer, and so that it sticks to the tape. So I'm going to start on the edge that has more of the stencil and just kind of take it and very slowly peel this off, and then just keep going. Just go slow so that none of the pieces rip. Occasionally a piece might stay on the white backer part. Just go ahead, like this one, just go ahead and take and peel it down and push it back onto the tape. When you get to the edge here, just be careful and go slow to make sure all the pieces stay on the tape and they don't accidentally come off. Once I have my stencil off of my backer, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line the bottom edge here up with the bottom edge here up with the top of my tape. Make sure that it fits in both directions here and on the top. And then I'm just going to go ahead and press that all down. Take my credit card and do the same thing. Just kind of go over. And then I'm going to peel the tape off very carefully so that the stencil stays onto my board. The very edge here is a little bit tricky, so just be careful with that. But once you have that part down, the rest should go a little bit smoother. Just go slow and watch out, make sure none of the pieces stay on the tape. Press them down onto the board if they do. And the same thing when you get over here to the other edge, just go slow to make sure none of the pieces accidentally come up with the tape. After I've taken the tape off, I'm just going to go in with my finger and press everything down really well to make sure that sticker is stuck and there's no lumps or bumps or places where it's sticking up that paint could seep underneath. Once I have my sticker down, I'm going to sponge on some black paint. Make sure that your sponge is really dry, it doesn't have any moisture in it. And then I'm going to dip my sponge into the paint. I'm going to dab it off on the paper plate, and then I'm going to dab it some more to really make sure I don't have a lot of paint on my sponge. Make sure that you don't get paint that seeps underneath your stencil. You want to do 2 things. You want to use not a lot of paint and not a lot of pressure. So we're going to do this very, very lightly. So we're just very lightly going to tap on top of this and just create almost like a seal on this first layer. So it's not going to look like too much in this first layer because we're going to go very lightly. We're not going to have a lot of paint. And the more pressure, the more paint that you use, the more likely it is that paint is going to go underneath your stencil. As needed, you can get a little bit more paint on your sponge, but just keep in mind you want it to be very dry. Keep dabbing it off so that you don't have a lot of paint on your sponge. Important when you're doing this that you're dabbing up and down and not swiping. If you swipe, you're going to get paint underneath your stencil or potentially take your stencil off. So make sure you're dabbing up and down. Once you have finished your first layer, go ahead and do a second. You will probably need 3 layers to cover the whole thing, but just each layer, keep remembering, not a lot of paint, not a lot of pressure. Okay, once you've done your black, Let it dry so that it's not shiny anymore, and then we're gonna peel the stencil off. So it's not gonna come off in one piece, but you're just gonna kind of start peeling it, let it break if it needs to, and then go in and take out the inside pieces. You can just pick at it with your finger, or you can use a toothpick, or if you have like a sewing pin or a sewing needle, you can use that to kind of pick up the pieces as well. Just make sure when you are picking it that you're not accidentally picking your board or scratching or leaving a dent in it. We're also going to take off our tape. Just slowly kind of peel it. And now that we have everything done and painted, we're gonna glue it on. So before I glue, I just like to kind of take my pieces and lay them down where I want them to get placement. Once I have everything where I want it, I'm gonna start gluing. So I'm gonna take the glue, shake it up a little bit, and then open it. And then I'm gonna use the applicator to apply the glue. I like to have a scrap piece of paper nearby so I can take the applicator and apply the glue to the back of the pieces. After I apply the glue, I'm gonna take and stamp it off onto the scrap piece of paper to remove the excess, and then I'm going to line it up on my wood. Press it down for a couple of seconds to make sure it adheres. And then just repeat that with each of the pieces. You can take your stand and just slide the two pieces together to display it. You can glue your stand if you want, but if you don't glue it, then at the end to store it, you can take your stand back apart. So there you have it. I hope you had some fun. I hope you learned a few things. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I would love to see what you created. You can contact me at my email, natalie@tangleartistry.com, or on social media on Facebook and Instagram, it's @tangleartistry. Thanks so much. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.